we are going to be focusing on civil society matters. And so in this session, we have the opportunity to speak with David Bynoe. He is the National Coordinator with the UNDP's GEF Small Grants Program. And also joining us this morning, we have Anne Gallagher. She is Director General of the Commonwealth Foundation. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great to have you with us. All right, so of course, for today's session, we wanted to look at the relationship between COVID-19 and gender. And, you know, people may be having a little trouble understanding the relations, but David, I give you the first opportunity to lead us into this conversation.
Thank you. First of all, let me set the context of that. The Just Small Grants Program, implemented by UNDP from its inception in 1992, we've always had a strong focus on gender. And therefore, the partnership that we initiated with the Commonwealth Foundation was something of an organic partnership. It was not only our duty, but it was our pleasure to really engage in such. Within the context of the Caribbean and also globally, people experience climate change differently, and that often depends on gender and also the intersectionality between gender, age, social class, even race. And therefore, these things are very important to understand and to contextualize. So, in our first partnership together with the Commonwealth Foundation in 2018, we looked at what can we do to understand the context better between gender and climate change in the Caribbean. And then one of the key things that came out of that from the participants regionally, they said having a gender tool that can engage in analysis and help them to understand that relationship better will be very useful to them. And therefore, we initiated that. And finally, I want to say that this partnership is also a partnership that is in a direct reaction to what's happening level. In the 72nd General Assembly in New York, the head of the Commonwealth and also the UN Secretary General, they're both committed for the Commonwealth Foundation and the UN to work more closely together. And so I'm extremely proud of this partnership that we've had over the last 3 years.
This is a great time to include Ms. Gallagher to tell us a bit about that relationship and, you know, what you're hoping for in terms of the achievements coming out of it.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with you this morning, even under these rather difficult and constrained circumstances. And thanks so much to David, because it's been a wonderful partnership for us with UNDP in relation to this program. Now, the Commonwealth Foundation is that part of the Commonwealth that is responsible for supporting civil society. So we have a big mandate. There are 2.4 billion people within citizens of our Commonwealth. So it's a big job, but it's such an important one to bring the voices of the people into the Commonwealth. And the issue that we're talking about now, gender and climate change, and as you mentioned as well, gender coming up in relation to COVID-19, these are absolutely critical, because one of the things we do know is that climate change impacts people differently. People have different vulnerabilities, and understanding those vulnerabilities, bringing that understanding into our discussions around climate change, bringing it into policy development is absolutely critical, because otherwise we have solutions that are not sustainable and that are not effective. And this has actually been recognised by the UN at the big climate change negotiations, where they actually specifically recommended stronger participation of marginalised voices in policy development. So this is around both mitigation and adaptation. So what we did, as David explained, we partnered very well with UNDP and the University of the West Indies to develop this tool, something that can actually help lesser heard voices come into the climate change conversation. And when we talk about gender, when we talk about intersectionality, what we're really talking about is power. Identifying where the power lies and where it doesn't lie, and making sure that those who don't have sufficient power, who don't have the voice, get that voice, are empowered to become part of these conversations, as I said, to make sure that our policies speak for everyone, not just for a few.
Excellent. Excellent. That's what we
do have
want, an inclusive situation. So, David, we've got that clip to share, but go ahead and make your point before we go to that.
No, I think that is what Anne said contextualized very well the discussion thus far and some of the results. But I would like us to go directly to the video so we can see some of the work from Barbados when we went to Jamaica and some of the open country.
I'm looking forward to seeing more representation of civil society organizations and grassroots level organizations in terms of least developed countries and small island states.
For us, gender is not male-female. It's looking at the intersectionality, looking at age, social economic background, disabilities, sexuality, location, all of those things.
It's about men and women building a relationship so that we can improve the lives of everyone. Because whether you believe it or not, gender is a lived experience and we all experience it differently.
Women, they face higher risks when it comes to natural hazards, as well as they shoulder a significant burden in terms of having resources to deal with the impacts of climate change after they happen.
So at COP24 last year, there was definitely a focus on the Gender Action Plan, the GAP. The UNFCCC sort of focused on how are women being represented on panels and side events. Are there equal numbers of men and women discussing at these different events?
There was a need to have a clear gender tool to facilitate mainstreaming and capturing data. It also spoke about having the ability to then interpret that data amongst civil society and present it in a format that you can have a dialogue with government so you can influence the policy making process. And I think this second conversation really captured that.
What we're able to do is to indicate to the civil society organizations here ways in which they can work at the national level to liaise with their national organizations. We're giving them the tools to integrate gender in the negotiations at the national level.
So moving beyond just participation of women to actually thinking about how these international agreements that they come up with are actually gender responsive.
I'm also very hopeful that the delegations will have more gender balance in terms of males and females, youth, and other groups.
It has helped to better inform my understanding of gender issues, mainstreaming, being gender sensitive, having gender perspective. Now I understand what are the elements to incorporate when you think about those things.
From my own life, it would definitely enhance my sensitivities and my consciousness as to vulnerabilities. And not just look at vulnerabilities from my lens, but from my spouse's lens, from the other females around me.
I definitely have had my eyes opened into looking at how different groups of people are affected differently by climate change.
I think that we have done an excellent job as partners in continuing the conversation from Barbados to Jamaica, and we have some solid information to work with. What is left now for us to do is to put it into action.
Governments within the region have a lot to learn about the specific gender issues within the Caribbean. And so this conversation and working with CSOs has really brought to the forefront the different groups beyond gender and how they are affected by climate change in the Caribbean context.
Partnerships that give that voice and rise to those matters of gender that we need to address. So in the final 2 minutes, I'll let each of you respond and share the takeaway that you want for today. Ms. Gallagher?
Well, I'm just so happy that we have this tool now, because we've begun to work with UNDP and our partners in the Caribbean on that critical next step that David talked about, actual implementation, making a real difference. And really, I just wanted to finish by saying that it's not going to end there, because there are other parts of the world where the work which has been done will be absolutely invaluable. And the Commonwealth Foundation is looking forward to taking these lessons, to taking these resources to some other parts of the world, such as the Pacific, also on the climate change frontline, that desperately need them. Thank you so much.
Excellent. David?
Yes. In terms of this gender and climate change, but also COVID-19, because it still implies the same thing with COVID, because it impacts them differently. If you look at the sectors in the Caribbean, we are very much tourism-based and service-based, and about 70% of the persons within those service industries are females. When you look at frontline workers, especially medical and hospital staff, they are female as well. So this gender imbalance and the impacts are going to be very different. And therefore, within the Just Small Grants program, we have consistently ensured that gender is incorporated in our projects. About 93% of our projects globally are gender responsive, and every year, over 250,000 persons are directly impacted, and those persons being female directly impacted by our projects. So we would continue to ensure that we take the type of community action that cumulatively has a global impact, and it relates to gender, climate change, and COVID. We will not only talk the talk, but we will walk the walk. That is how we're going to proceed.
Excellent. Well said. Well said. And we thank you so much for choosing Mornin Barbados as a part of the platform to share the message, Civil Society Matters. A huge thank you to Anne-Therese Gallagher, Director General of the Commonwealth Foundation. And thank you so much, David Bynoe, National Coordinator, GEF Small Grants Program with the UNDP.